Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's VACo webinar. Hope everyone can hear me all right. Yell at me in the chat if you cannot. Welcome to the webinar, Virginia Transit and Rail Update, Funding Policy and What's Ahead. I'm James Hutzler with the Virginia Association of Counties, and I get to handle transportation policy for our lovely counties across Virginia. We have county administrators, elected officials, planners, transit professionals, and tons of local government staff from across the Commonwealth participating. We appreciate you being with us. Just a couple items beforehand. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent out afterwards. It'll also be posted on our VACo website for future viewing. The slides will be sent out to all attendees and also posted on our website. And a big part of this, we're trying to make this more conversational, get to meet the director and all that fun stuff. So please, if you have questions during the presentation, type them into the chat and we will do our best to get to them. Transportation continues to be one of the most important issues facing our counties, of course, whether it's connecting residents to jobs and services, economic development, reducing congestion, improving mobility for older adults and individuals with disabilities. Transit and rail investments have a direct impact on all of our communities. Counties also have a strong interest in how transportation funding is allocated, how state and federal policy decisions affect local priorities, and how emerging transportation initiatives can support community needs both now and in the future. That's what makes today's discussion especially timely, as we are fortunate to have with us Mariia Zimmerman, Director of the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation. As director, she oversees the Commonwealth's transit and rail programs and works closely with local governments, transit agencies, regional partners, and transportation stakeholders throughout Virginia. Under her leadership, DRPT continues to advance important initiatives related to passenger rail expansion, transit funding, multimodal transportation, and long-range mobility planning. Today's presentation will provide an update on DRPT's current priorities, funding outlook, key policy developments, and what county leaders should be watching in the months ahead. From our perspective here at VACo, we greatly value our partnership with DRPT and appreciate the agency's willingness to engage directly with county leaders. We know many of our members are interested in topics such as sustainable transportation funding, of course, rural transit accessibility, passenger rail, and potential changes to the merit and trip program, which I definitely have a couple questions I'd like to ask myself regarding those program changes or potential changes. So we appreciate Director Zimmerman taking the time to join us today and share her insights. I'm going to turn it over to you and your staff, and really appreciate you being here. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, James. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today, and hope those who are joining us today or maybe watching this webinar in the future know that we at the Department of Rail and Public Transportation, we very much have an open door policy, as do every bus operator out there on the street. Like, we are really here to work with you and to serve the Commonwealth. And so feel free at any point to reach out to us. We absolutely are partners in this work. I also, as you were talking, James, I realize, as I won't give away my age, but I think I've lived only 7 of the years of my long life as a city resident, and all the rest have been in a county. Growing up in rural Minnesota in Waseca County, and then living here in Virginia for 30 years between Arlington County and Henrico County. So my gratitude to county leaders who, in my life and in my work, I often feel that the county level government is really the secret sauce that makes incredible things happen. And so excited to be here with county partners. So let's go to the next page. Just kind of very quickly, a few things that I want to talk about with you over the time, and then absolutely want to answer any questions and get in dialogue with folks. I'll do a kind of quick update on kind of what we have in Virginia, which we're really blessed compared to some of our counterparts around the country, of having a pretty robust and impressive rail and public transportation system. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm sure folks are always interested in our funding, and so we'll talk a little bit about some of those funding programs that we have available, some of the changes that might be coming down the pike with that, and then also some other key initiatives. But as I mentioned, in my work and my experience in my life, counties are really essential transit partners, and that's really true here in Virginia. the way we are as a Dillon state, as the partnership between the state, counties, and localities. We at DRPT, we in Virginia, we're not like Maryland. The state isn't running transit. It's really reliant on our county and local partners and other partners like Amtrak, like VRE, which again is part of a regional commission and regional authorities that we have in Virginia. But through those counties, you are the ones who are helping to develop the plans for projects that could go forward to be funded, and hopefully thinking how transportation plans interact with land use and other development plans. Transportation really only works as good as the land use around it. And so really thinking whether it is a new employer coming into the county, it is a major university, it is a county library, it's whatever that facility is, how well are we connecting it with transportation options so people, all people in the county, regardless of age or ability or income level, are able to access county economic opportunities, social opportunities, and educational and healthcare opportunities. Really critical. Counties have played a critical role in maintaining local infrastructure and coming up with those improvements, and then also funding. You are critical funding partners. Obviously, the state and often the federal government is part of that mix too, but really the funding coming from counties, from regional commissions, from local governments, it's all part of how we create that capital stack to both maintain, operate, build, and expand our transportation infrastructure, regardless if it's highway, rail, or public transportation. So let's get in a little bit about kind of talking about what we have here in Virginia. Hopefully folks are aware. We can go to the next slide here, Evan. And this is a good opportunity. Joining me today, I do have a number of our terrific staff from DRPT. We have Evan Price, who's going to be helping me go through the slide deck. Thank you, Evan. He's with our policy and communications team. We have Alan Fye, who's our deputy director. We have Zach Trogdon, who is our chief for public transportation, and Emily Stock, who is our chief for rail. So again, feel free to reach out to any of us at any time with questions. But one thing I like to let folks know, not everyone is fully aware that DRPT, the Department of Rail and Public Transportation, we are our own separate independent agency. We are not part of VDOT, but we work closely with VDOT. We were established by the General Assembly in 1992. Very important role that we have to allocate state funding. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We just had the General Assembly and the Commonwealth Transportation Board approve our budgets, approve our 6-year improvement program. So for DRPT, that's a little over $7 billion over the next 6 years. That is revenues that we will be allocating for important rail and public transportation projects across the Commonwealth. We also are responsible for a number of statewide studies, and we provide technical assistance and work very closely with our partners in that work. So let's go to the next slide. I mentioned the collaboration that we have with VDOT. We work very closely together with them. Most of the public transportation that we have in Virginia runs on roads. Those are our buses. And so that partnership with VDOT, with counties, with local localities as well is really important. And here in Virginia, as folks know, VDOT has a particularly large portfolio of managing all those highways, bridges, and other related surface infrastructure. So one of the things we're really working with the Secretary's guidance is how we think about safety and improvements to reduce fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways. I'm always happy to say that rail and public transportation are the safest modes of travel that people have. But often if you're, a bus rider, perhaps that least safe part of your journey is as a pedestrian getting to or from the bus stop. And so how do we work with VDOT to really make sure that we are making investments that are going to work for transit, that are going to work for drivers, that are going to work for riders, they're going to work for bicyclists and all users, critically important. And so we're happy to be partners with them in that work. We also, back in 2020, the General Assembly created the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. They are responsible for leading the corridor development and construction, not the operations of our state-supported passenger rail. And so VPRA right now responsible for a host of really exciting, important projects, particularly between Washington, D.C. and Springfield. Folks may know about the Long Bridge project. We're where we're creating an entire new bridge over the Potomac River in the DC metro region, along with a pedestrian and bike bridge that will be parallel to that. But a number of investments that are happening that we work very closely between DRPT and VPRA that will be by 2030 creating almost hourly service between DC and Richmond. Next year, we will complete the expansion into the new River Valley out in southwestern Virginia, as well as improvements that have happened to improve rail service between DC and the Norfolk, Newport News, Hampton Roads area. So lots happening on there. We work very closely together with our sister agencies to make sure that these investments are supporting all the Commonwealth. So next slide, please. So I'm pretty passionate about rail and public transportation. If you talk to me for probably more than 5 minutes, that will become clear. But part of why it is, as somebody who, for different periods of my life, I didn't have a car. Either I was too young, I didn't have my driver's license yet, or I lived in Arlington County and was able to get around without a car, or I was helping older parents and relatives that had disabilities try to navigate that, and really seeing the impact that public transportation, when it's working well, can have on people's lives, on our regional economies, and really on people's economic mobility and access to opportunity. We see here in Virginia, I won't read all of these bullets, but I'll spotlight a few. I think it's important to always remember we have a significant number of households without an access to car, but even within that, I used to joke that for many years, I felt like the only reason I was really driving was to get my child to soccer games. But it's true that we have, a number of people in households who can't drive because they might be too young. And if we think about teenagers and opportunities for them to be able to use public transportation, that's critically important. We also have a growing number of our population that might not be able to drive because of their age or their ability. And so again, how can we ensure that people can live active, independent lives without having to either themselves get behind a wheel if that might be dangerous for them, or feel like they're burdening their friends or families having to ask for a ride, but being able to have that independence and mobility. And then some people who don't have a car because they either choose not to have a car, or it might be too expensive for them to own and operate a vehicle. And so really thinking about the many different needs and motivations behind why people may or may not be using public transportation, I think is always really critical to think about, are we serving all of those needs? Are we serving all of those rights? Are we giving people those choices, especially, if we think about right now, the climate we're in with the high cost of gasoline. And for a lot of households, that's like an exponentially high amount of money, over $5,000 a year now, just to fill up your car with gasoline. That's money that probably could be spent in better ways, both for those households, but also for counties. Like, that's money that could be going into sales revenues, into housing, into a lot of other things that might be generating more value for county government than just filling up the tank. We also like to think about the climate benefits of both rail and public transportation. And again, they're pretty significant when we think about being able to divert cars or trucks from roads and be able to move goods and people by rail and by transportation. And then again, just noting that housing and transportation are the two highest costs for most households. And a lot of times people are making trade-offs, right? Trying to find affordable housing, but having higher transportation costs to move further and further out to get that. So how do we think about the household cost burden for people? So the next slide, again, we've got lots of facts and figures. I won't belabor it anymore with this slide in particular, other than to note that at DRPT, we do have our data portal, and it has a lot of this information that you can look up and you can get, and you can see kind of what is the value of rail and public transportation to us? What are the ridership numbers looking like in your county or in your part of the state? Well, last year we saw 154 million trips that were taken on public transportation. A number of transit systems have met or exceeded their pre-COVID transit ridership numbers, but we also have a significant number across Virginia that still have not yet recovered to those numbers that they were before. There's a number of reasons for that. I think we've seen commuting patterns that have changed for a lot of folks, more people working remotely, being able to telecommute for those jobs, but also some people who left transit and maybe haven't come back to transit. And so how do we think about, again, being able to really serve that? We've seen a lot of growth on the freight rail side and the passenger rail side in Virginia over the last several years, and continuing to see that as it grows. And so, again, happy to talk about some of those ridership trends and about the economic value that we see here. You can see almost $5 billion in economic value generated between rail and public transportation for the Commonwealth in the last year. So next slide, please. What we have in Virginia, I mentioned before, we're pretty lucky in Virginia in many ways. We have, I think, a somewhat robust rail and public transportation system that we should feel good about. I think it reflects the investments that the state's been making, certainly over the last 6 years, but even longer term with that. We have 41 public transportation systems. That includes WMATA, serving many millions of riders up there in Northern Virginia. We also have not just the public transportation operators, but also our human service providers, many of whom might be parts of county governments or areas of aging or nonprofits and other partners who oftentimes are helping to get people to the doctor's appointments, providing paratransit service, other kind of critical, essential transportation service for folks. And then, we do this in partnership with our 15 metropolitan planning organizations. We also have the Virginia Railway Express providing commuter service between down to Spotsylvania County from DC and out into Manassas on the Manassas line through Fairfax and Loudoun County. So lots going on there. I'll talk a minute about our intercity bus, but I also just want to note on the freight rail side, we have 9 very robust short line railroads in Virginia and 2 what we call Class 1 railroads, so CSX and Norfolk Southern. We, with the Secretary, are closely watching what happens with the proposed merger of Norfolk Southern and Union Pacific. But again, we have a strong rail ecosystem here in the Commonwealth, including Amtrak, who is the operator for the state-supported passenger rail service, no matter where you are in Virginia. All right, next slide is showing the intercity bus. So I don't know if folks are aware, but we do have the Virginia Breeze, which has been growing ridership since it kicked off service, I think about 6 years ago. And just earlier this year in April, we opened up the 5th route. And here you can see the map of that service. And so it's really connecting a lot of communities who maybe don't have rail access. Maybe they used to have Greyhound service. We've seen some reduction of intercity bus service over the last few decades. And so the Virginia Breeze offers currently daily service that can connect the communities that you see here on the map. And if you notice, yes, indeed, it's kind of mirroring some of our key highway and interstate corridors. So we have 2 lines there kind of paralleling Interstate 81, connecting from DC down to Bristol. Also there in Blacksburg, so we can get to Virginia Tech, we can get to JMU, we can get to a bunch of universities there. We also have the lighter blue greenish line that connects from DC down to Danville, so sort of hugging that 29 corridor with stops in Charlottesville. We have the purple line from DC that also goes down to Dansville and stops in Richmond. And then the line that opened this spring, that is our first east-west line. That east-west line I'm particularly excited about. We call that the current. And that line is paralleling a rail corridor that many folks have been interested in possibly seeing come to fruition. We don't currently have east-west rail service in Virginia, but DRPT, we are leading a study to look at what we're calling the Commonwealth Corridor. Early stages of that planning study to see the feasibility of doing something like that. But that will be many, many years into the future if it does happen. So in the meantime, we're really excited to introduce service this year on the east-west corridor. We're running a sale right now, so feel free to, we've got some extra service for the July 4th weekend and a sale that's running currently. So next slide. how to connect to all of these different assets. We would love your help as county partners to make sure that people in your counties are aware of the Connecting VA app. You can download this on your phone and you can find out information. You're trying to travel somewhere in Virginia by rail, or maybe you want to find out about the brief service, or maybe you're trying to find about local bike trails or bus routes. The Connecting VA app is really kind of your one stop to be able to do that. It's free to download. And we've been, earlier in May was Bike Month. We used the Connecting VA app to do kind of a fun competition between cities to see which city could have the most bike trips logged onto the Connecting VA app. So I'll put it as a VACo challenge. Maybe we can have a county challenge here later this year, maybe for Tri-Transit Month, to see which county can track the most transit riders or something exciting like that. So Tri-Transit Month is in September. All righty, let's see. Our next slide we'll dig into talking about funding. So as mentioned, the DRPT and VDOT, we just passed our 6-year improvement program. It was approved by the Commonwealth Transportation Board on June 16th. Lots of details available on our website and on VDOT's website and the CTB website, where you can dig into those details and really see specific projects and funding for each of the 9 VDOT districts for both transit and VDOT funding. And as you can see, we're kind of focused particularly on fiscal year 27, which will start on July 1st. And we have a total of $950.4 million for public transportation that is programmed for fiscal year 27, $25.4 million for freight rail grants and state rail planning grants, as well as $101 million that we're passing through to VPRA for state-supported passenger rail. So let's dig into a little bit about some of our specific funding opportunities. This slide is just showing on the rail side, for the most part, there are some other funds, including some important federal funds, but we fund our passenger and rail programs through the Commonwealth Rail Fund. VPRA gets 93% of that funding, and DRPT has 7% of the funding that we do. That's really primarily focused on freight rail and some of our planning studies. If we look at the next slide, I just wanted to highlight some of our specific rail grant programs. Rail Preservation Fund and the Freight Program and our other transit programs, we open up the application portal for that at the beginning of December. And folks can submit applications for grant and formula funding between December and February 1st. And then we review those grants, and then we get into the process of developing the SIP. I will mention, we are looking more broadly at DRPT's grant programs to see if there are ways we can additionally streamline these processes. So kind of stay tuned over the next year or two. We might have some additional details on that. But our core programs on the freight rail side, you can see the Rail Preservation Fund, which primarily is funding those short line Class 3 railroads to help upgrade the status of rail. And then we have the Freight Program that can help to do expansion projects for the rail network. We also have the Rail Industrial Access Program, and this is the one program we have that's open year-round. And I think it's a pretty exciting program when you think about the connection between rail access and industrial economic development at the county level. If we go to the next slide, you can see just a little bit here that I wanted to spotlight about the RIA grants. These, like, if you have a company in your county, and we've funded seed, a chicken feed company this last year. We funded an industrial company that's moving large scale manufactured products. If you have a business located in your county and they're near one of those rail lines, but they don't yet have a connection to that, they can come work with us, talk with our staff, talk with Emily and the team, and we can help you to see if the RIA might be a good grant where the state is providing funding to help create that kind of short connection. In some instances, we're talking like 12,000 feet of rail that we're building just to connect up that business to that rail so we can divert traffic off of local roads and streets and highways and onto rail, providing cost savings for the company, reducing carbon emissions and traffic for those of us who are caring about those issues, and oftentimes helping to create jobs with these new employers or existing employers who are looking to do that type of expansion work. So reach out to us at any point. We're always really excited to talk about that particular program. And able to make those applications and funding decisions move pretty quickly. All of our freight rail programs, there is a process, and you can find out a lot more information on our website about eligibility, about how we score those, about how we make funding decisions to look at kind of the return on investment and the cost benefit of those projects. But oftentimes we see on the freight rail side, we're really leveraging state resources with private and other public resources. So let's turn to transit. Yep.
Just wanted to quip and say any project that gets trucks off I-81, I think, is a well worth project, in my opinion, and the opinion of some county leaders across that corridor. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's pretty exciting to see the projects. I think this is like our small, mighty project where we're really diverting significant numbers of trucks off of these highways. All righty. Thanks, James, for that. So on the transit side, this is funded through the Commonwealth Mass Transit Fund. For the most part, again, we do have different additional funding resources in Virginia, but I'll just talk about the CMTF that DRPT works on and some of these particular grant programs. We'll dig into this a little bit in the next slide. You can see of the CMTF funding, 46.5% is dedicated funding for WMATA. And then we also have some set aside funding, 3.5% for Virginia Railway Express. And then those other set of funds is what we'll dig into in the next set of slides. Again, those are all projects where you can submit applications for funding for DRPT to review and hopefully support. So our major transit funding programs, and we're showing here our FY27 allocation numbers. So off the top, we have our state public transportation operating assistance, or our merit operating assistance, we call this. This is funding that we kind of joke internally that you apply for it, but really it's you are telling us what your operating costs are, and the state can fund up to 30% of a transit agency's operating budget. We do look at a number of different performance metrics. So in allocating this funding, again, we're looking at size of systems. Those operating costs tend to be impacted by the size of the system, right? How many riders are you serving? What are the length of your routes? How many buses do you have? And so this is the merit operating that we're in the process right now, as James was mentioning, of looking at making some changes to the formula that we use as a state. So happy to talk about that and have some of the team who've been closely involved with that. But one of the big things that we're trying to do with the changes underway right now for merit operating is, unlike a lot of times on the highway side, on the transit side for state funding, we're kind of like each year come and apply, and then we'll let you know each year. And what we're trying to move towards having is more stability and predictability of what you could expect for your state operating funding support from us at DRPT. And then the code that creates the merit funding program is also really focused on performance. And so how can we give additional incentive funding for those agencies that are able to attract more riders, that are able to really get more operational efficiencies. And so that we can, again, talk more about. We've been doing a lot of outreach on the potential changes to the merit program. You can find all the information about that on the DRPT site. If you look up merit operating, we're working with what we call TSDAC, the Transit Service Advisory Council, and we appreciate Cindy Meister, who's been working with us, and John McClellan as a VACo rep on that process. Again, as we're working towards having more stability, predictability, and kind of more transparency in how to reward performance and recognize the operating costs. Oh, Cindy, I see you're on there. Thank you. We also have our Merit Capital Assistance Program, and that is, again, where folks submit applications, a heavy focus in that program per the state legislation on it being able to fund what we call state of good repair. So keeping those transit systems, keeping those vehicles safe and running well and operating well. And so that's really been a major source of capital purchases that we're able to support through that. Projects can also come in through Smart Scale, which is separate. It's entirely separate from what I've just talked about right here, but we do know sometimes folks will go to Smart Scale for really big capital projects as well. We can also fund some additional capital expansion projects through our TRIP program, our Transit Ridership Incentive Program. And so you can see here, we allocated $35 million this last year. Some of that is, again, to be able to do some transit expansion projects, to do projects that, again, are going to increase ridership, incentivize ridership productions. We are also in the process of looking at changes to the TRIP program per legislation that just passed the General Assembly earlier this year. And then the funding that we do to Washington Metro and VRE, and then a whole bucket of funding that is special commuter demonstration programs. So these are programs in the code, again, that are getting at different things. But if you have something innovative that you want to test out, you want to move forward, if you got some ideas around safety and security that you might want to fund, if you're thinking about microtransit and you want to fund that, if you have paratransit needs, whatever you have, we probably have a program at DRPT that could be able to support that. So come knock on our door. A couple I wanted to spotlight, and then I promise I'm going to stop talking here for questions too. But let's go to the next slide. One thing really near and dear to my heart, and that I know we're seeing is important in a lot of parts of Virginia, is mobility for our most vulnerable households. We have a few different programs that can fund that and support that. So if we can go to the next slide. So we can provide state matching grants, I should say state matching funds, and we also administer the Federal Transit Administration's 5310 Human Service Transportation Grants. So I mention this because, again, we're seeing a growing need just given the aging population, but especially in some of the southwestern parts of the state, some of our more rural counties, but, you know, people are aging in all parts of Virginia, so it's really a statewide issue. Up in Northern Virginia, the Washington Metropolitan Council of Governments, COG, and through the TPB, they manage a lot of the paratransit funding up there and the human service coordination funding. WMATA, Fairfax County, others have special programs, so please check with if you're in Northern Virginia, the programs that are available through COG, and check with the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, who's a great partner up there, as well as the Potomac Rappahannock Transportation Commission. But we also have funding that we can provide to counties around the state to support human service grants. I mentioned the Transit Ridership Incentive Program and our Rural Transit Assistance Program. So again, if you have a need, if you have, again, it could be maybe something the county is thinking about, a new service it wants to provide to seniors or to people with disabilities, or maybe you're working with, you've got a VA hospital that's located and you're trying to figure out how to improve access with there. Come and talk with our team, because there are different grant programs and we can think about which one might be the best match for what it is you're trying to do. There are these federal transportation funds that are also available that flows through DRPT. And in some instances, we can talk with you and see, like, is it preferable to get federal funding? There's always strings that come with federal fundings. We've got a little bit more flexibility on the state side. So sometimes being able to get the state funds is better. And we kind of talk through that of what's the right way to patch that up. But overall, we're just seeing way more transportation needs for this population than we can currently fund. And it's really where I hope we can have stronger partnership with the counties, because I think we all need to put our hands together and figure out how are we going to ensure that people can live independent and active lives no matter where they are in Virginia, no matter their age or their ability. These are often some of the most expensive transit rides to provide as well. So it really creates the need for a lot of creative thinking on this. And I think this is also where technology, new software that's coming out using our our smartphones, thinking about trip planning in different ways. There's a lot of innovation that we can see here, and some of the microtransit pilots that are also happening around the state are in response to this. So let's go to the next slide, which as I've been mentioning, it may be that you have decided there's a local public transit need that people are talking about, and maybe you think it's crazy, maybe you think it's like the best idea ever and you're having a hard time moving it forward. Please come and talk with us. One of the grants that we can offer is what we call the Demonstration Project Assistant Grant, or Merit Demo, and it is specifically designed to pilot public transportation in communities. And so some, communities have used this to pilot public transportation for the first time. So it might be just your county hasn't had public transportation. You want to start small. You want to see, what's involved with that, work out the kinks. We can help to support you through that with the Merit Demo program. Some are looking at a new transit service like microtransit, which I talked about already. We've seen in some instances the county doing this, in some instances working through the PDC, and the PDC might be providing that, or it might be through the local transit operator. So for instance, even in the Richmond region, GRTC is using some funding to do microtransit in Powhatan and in Chesterfield counties, introducing it into new parts of the region that haven't had transit before. And so I talked to, there's more details on this. It's an 18 to 36 month time frame for the projects. The state can provide an 80% of the funding, and the localities have to come up with that 20% local match. As I mentioned, it doesn't need to be operated just by the local government. It can be a nonprofit, an area council on aging. It can be other public service corporations. So lots of opportunities there to think about trying transit in your community, or expanding it, or trying something new and innovative that maybe you haven't done yet before. So I'm going to wrap up. Let's click to the slide about looking ahead and advancing critical issues. There's a lot that is going on at DRPT, as hopefully you've heard me rapidly run through here over the last 40 minutes. But we're also excited about some things that as we look ahead. I mentioned revisions happening to the statewide transit operating formula, Merit. We are going to be presenting those recommendations to the Commonwealth Transportation Board in September, and they will be voting on that in October. So, check in with us before then. If you've got questions, if you haven't participated in many of the listening sessions that we've had so far, we're happy to talk to you before that, or you can tune in for that CTB meeting and hear more details on that. We are looking to make some substantial changes that we hope will be really beneficial changes, again, to provide more stability and predictability and truly rewarding performance for agencies around the Commonwealth. We also have a number of studies that the General Assembly has directed us to do. One of those I'm really excited about. We are kicking off a statewide transit-oriented development study. It is due to the General Assembly by the end of this year. And so we're looking at a phase 1, and we'd love to work with the counties on this. We know a lot of counties have been thinking about transit-oriented development, maybe have developed some TOD plans or think about different properties. This study will look at all the existing and the planned transit and rail, kind of high capacity transit and rail stations that we have across the Commonwealth. And again, kind of pulling together any of that existing planning work that has been done, but also projecting what is the potential for new housing that could be supported in these transit-oriented developments across the state, and looking at opportunities and barriers. We also have a few studies that are looking at specific transit issues, as you can see here in this slide, consolidating regional bus service up in Nova, looking at private companies and public transportation service equivalent compensation. There's a work group that will be supporting through that, a WMATA cost savings and efficiency report. So lots happening. I did this slide deck before the budget just passed this week. So those are all included. Those are all things that we'd be looking at. And we're also in the process of updating our statewide rail plan. which again, we've been doing a lot of public outreach on that. We encourage you all to get involved. If you're looking at freight issues, passenger rail issues, we've done some survey work and know that Virginians really love rail, and we love that. And so how do we think about potentially increased service on existing corridors or potentially new corridors that we could be studying and thinking about? And then last but not least, we'll be kicking off what we're calling Transforming Transit in Virginia. And this, again, is to really better understand kind of what are the costs and the needs and the benefits of transit across and to the Commonwealth. More details to come on that in September as we kick off that study. But again, it's something we'll want to work closely with our county partners on to, again, really understand what are the needs that we have, what's the value that transit brings to the Commonwealth, and what ways could we think about transforming transit into the future to really make sure that we're meeting our goals of serving all Virginians and getting them lots of safe, reliable mobility choices. So the last slide is just kind of how to contact us, and then let's open it up for questions. We do have just a ton of information on the DRPT website, so feel free to check with that. My name does have 2 I's, Mariia.Zimmerman@drpt.virginia.gov. Always happy to be available and chat with folks. So James, I'll see what questions we have or you might have, and let's dig into it.
For sure, yeah, I definitely have a couple. Definitely appreciate you engaging with the counties, coming to this webinar. Really appreciate the outreach, and yeah, counties, contrary to popular belief, care about transit. We care about rail. We're not as urban and clustered as cities are most of the time, but you know what? We care. And I did have a question that I actually wrote down about the 2 I's in your name, but we can talk offline about that.
This is my father.
um, I guess a question from my perspective, and to enlighten some of the people who are here, is there a way you could give a quick overview or how the discussions have evolved around the merit operating formula changes? I know that there's different cohorts, and predictability is a big thing that the administration is rightfully, and we appreciate emphasizing in the changes. But is there a way you could just give a quick overview on what these changes are and what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, great question. And again, I'll maybe phone a friend if I've missed anything. There's members of the team here who've been very involved with it. But super quick overview. Yes, the current way that we allocate the funding across the state, we have a single kind of one size fits all operating formula. And we've heard for a number of years, there's a lot of variation among it's actually, I think, 39 agencies that are funded through merit operating, because merit operating isn't for WMATA or VRE, they're their own thing. And so one of the things that we are moving towards in response to that is this cohorting model that you mentioned. And the cohorting is really when we crunch the numbers a lot of different ways, what we see is the geographic area has a big impact on transit operating costs. What goes into operating costs? Labor costs is a huge factor into operating costs. The size of your fleet is a big factor. The distance that you're traveling is a big factor. So we're proposing 3 different cohorts. And so the transit agencies within those cohorts are all now going to be kind of evaluated against each other or against themselves and kind of the metrics for those cohorts. So we have a large urban cohort, we have a small urban cohort, and we have a rural cohort. And so within those different cohorts, again, we've really, through outreach with the community, through analysis of operating costs that we've been getting for many, many years now at DRPT, and we continue to get them on an annual basis. For each cohort, we can really kind of size the metrics that we're evaluating transit based on what are the things driving operating costs for those places. So for rural communities, we tend to see folks doing longer distances, typically lower ridership numbers, because in lots of rural communities, transit's not so much a congestion relief as it is essential transportation to get folks to places. in our large urban areas, again, it tends to be, really thinking about congestion. Often they have a higher cost of living, which does impact labor costs and just costs for workers in those regions. Tend to see, more riders, more trip frequency, sometimes less distance traveled, but not in all instances, because we have commuter bus service in some of our large metro areas. That's also really critically important. And then in our small urban areas, we see a little bit of a mix of that. So the cohorting is one key fundamentally different factor. Being able to then look at kind of those right size sizing metrics allows us to kind of create a baseline to project out for several years what we think the transit operating support would be for each agency. And then we have a performance bonus that, again, based on those agencies within your cohort, if you're really exceeding the ridership, kind of average ridership, if you're exceeding some of those service efficiencies, you kind of get extra credit from the state for being able to do that. So that's my take of merit changes in a nutshell. But again, I'll turn to the team if I missed something core here, or I misspoke on something.
No, that was a great summary, Mariia. Good. You can do the briefing all the time for us.
We've been sitting in lots of meetings on TISDAC talking about this. So Cindy could probably also give the merit thumbnail.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that. I'm just seeing if there's anyone in the audience who'd want to unmute, ask a question. Because I got one, I got a couple ready to fire if not. Perfect. I guess another question is, and you mentioned it a little bit, what the status of the trip program bill that passed last session. I know there's like a bit of they're giving a lot more of the authority to, come up with the parameters of the trip program to the TISDAC. We're seeing how that's going, if that started, what the conversations are like regarding the trip program.
Yeah, great question. So we are on a similar timeline with TRIP as with the merit operating. We will be briefing the Commonwealth Transportation Board in September on the proposed changes for TRIP. And then the Commonwealth Transportation Board will vote on those in October, and we would put those into effect with the FY28 grant cycle that will open up in December. That's a pretty tight time frame, so we anticipate there may be some additional tweaks to TRIP that could happen next year potentially. But what HB 200, the bill that passed this year, as you mentioned, James, kind of lifted some of the caps and different restrictions within the sub eligibility programs within TRIP, added some additional things that we can fund through TRIP. And so we're really looking at ways to kind of articulate those new eligibilities, including that local governments can directly apply now for TRIP funding. So it doesn't just have to be through a transit operating agency. Tribal communities in Virginia can also apply for those funding. But there's a set of the TRIP funds that one of the set of eligible activities is to support zero and no fare transit service. We have done that currently. It's in a kind of 4-year step down program. So it's the state provides 80% of the funding in the first year, and I think it's 60% of funding in the second year and 30% in the third year. And then there's a fourth year where you need to be able to show that you can fund it fully locally as part of that TRIP program. So that continues within there. There's a set of kind of innovative mobility enhancements. And so that can include things like micromobility with a public transportation connection. So, bike share or e-scooters or something that's, again, connecting and supporting transit. We can support some of the micro transit, some of the innovative paratransit solutions as part of that. There's also a set of eligible activities around ridership incentive programs and around safety and security. And then there's also a bucket that's around kind of the amenities, or I mean, we're not calling it amenities because I told the team it's not so much an amenity, it's kind of what makes transit essential, like bus stops, bus shelters, lighting, like things that make you feel safe, secure, and comfortable when you're taking transit. And so that's another set of things. So it's kind of a wide category of stuff that is eligible within that TRIP program now, and we'll have more details on that. If folks are really interested, next Tuesday, I think it is July 7th is the next TISDAC meeting, and there'll be a presentation on what we're proposing for the TRIP policy changes to bring before the CTB. All of that is on, again, the DRPT website once that information is publicly available, both the recordings of those TISDAC meetings and the meeting materials.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And my last question is, there were on the last slide, there were a bunch of different work groups that DRPT has to undergo, which, I mean, as soon as you get this job, they really didn't give you a honeymoon period at all. They are just, I mean, you couldn't have more initiatives, more plans going on. For all these work groups and things, are counties and other localities part of the administration's outreach plan? Like, are you expecting and hoping to hear from counties regarding these different work groups?
180% yes. Yes. So all of them, I think in some ways we want to engage counties, different levels of engagement with them. Some things, like I mentioned the statewide TOD study, a number of counties have already been doing a lot of work on that. And so you're also critical implementation partners. The state, we don't operate the transit or rail. We also don't make land use decisions. That is up to localities, whether it's the local jurisdictions under the counties. So absolutely, we're going to be engaging with the counties. We have a really great team that's going to be leading that work for us. So stay tuned, because we will be reaching out to directly engage with counties in that. The labor study, yes, the work group for that, we'd love to reach out to VACo to see if there's a representative you all have. But it's also the details of that specific legislation. It does not apply to every county in Virginia. It's like within a very specific kind of context of, what type of transit you have that's contracting out, and some things are exempted, like paratransit. So we will be reaching out to all of the counties and localities that are specifically, impacted by that legislation to see if they want to be a part of that. And then certainly the counties up in Northern Virginia will be a part of that regional consolidation study, because a number of them run their transit systems that are specifically named, whether it's ART or Fairfax County or Loudoun County or OmniRide serving that PRTC region. So.
Beautiful. Well, unless anyone else has a question, I think, I mean, I couldn't appreciate you more for coming. Slides are great. And again, everyone, you will be sent this. We'll post this webinar on our social medias, on our website, through our newsletter. We're going to share this out. Really, really appreciate you, Director Zimmerman, for coming, and your team. Too easy to work with. You guys got a lot to look forward to, a lot of work ahead, and really appreciate your partnership with VACo and all the other counties. So thank you so much.
Thank you, James. Thanks for the invitation. And yes, just a shout out to my team. I am lucky to work with the greatest state employees in Virginia. They're really fantastic. So I feel incredibly honored and lucky for that, and great to always work with the counties. So thanks, everyone.
Beautiful. I'll give you all 4 minutes back of your day. Thank you so much, Director. See you guys later.
Yep. Bye-bye.